No. Historicity of Quran.
I wouldn't be safe to say
We stand 50-50. You want to?
No. Quran only. Quran.
No, well,
Quran
it's already
only.
been done. It's been done 100 times over.
Quran.
If you want to do something new, we'd like to do something new.
I'm going to use your verses. Can you use my verses to disapprove the Quran?
When was the Quran authenticated? Was it with Muhammad's times?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I just want to ask a question. Are you in for debate?
Are you a Christian?
No.
Oh, you're not.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Can you defend your Quran?
No, are you not? You're not Christian.
No, if you want, no. If you want,
Can you defend your Quran?
When the Quran was it in Muhammad's
we
time?
know people come here. They say
Yes, it was when Muhammad was alive. The Quran was wrote.
Yes.
Put together.
That's true.
finish. That's it. No.
Okay. So do you want
What did he say? What did he say?
50-50?
Muhammad was alive when the Quran was completed.
50-50.
I'm not even certain. Was there a Muhammad? We're not certain.
I'm only asking when the Quran was put together. Was it in Muhammad's times or not?
Okay, do you want 50-50? 50-50.
Quran
No. You're scared.
I want to talk about something new. We've heard the Trinity arguments. Boring. Let's talk about something new. Talk about something new.
Ask me anything about the
You can
Quran.
talk to anyone about the
I will ask you
Trinity.
anything
I
about
don't-
your book.
Let's talk about the Quran.
Do you
Let's talk about
accept?
the Quran.
No, do you accept?
No, I've already answered
the
you.
Quran.
Can you defend your book?
All right.
Can you
Defend
defend your
the Quran
book?
first.
Can you
Defend the Quran
defend your book?
first. Defend the Quran first. Defend the Quran first. First the Quran. First the Quran.
No, you. 50-50.
I'm talking
You can
about
ask me about. Look.
somebody subject area.
I'll ask you one easy, simple question. Can you answer? Wait.
Okay.
I will
Not
ask you.
interested. I've given him an
Okay.
opportunity. Doesn't
I'll
want
ask
to.
you a simple
That's what they defend the Quran. That's what they don't want to defend the Quran.
Us about the Quran, you don't want to talk about the Bible. What's that? And you want to be a Christian? 50-50.
Yeah, a real quick wrap. What happened there?
No, he's not willing to discuss the topic that we came here to talk about. You know, we've already heard the Trinity arguments 100 times over. You know, it's boring. So
what do you wanted to discuss with him?
there's 101 topics, but I think probably sources of the Quran. What else? The multiple versions of the Quran, maybe as well.
Multiple versions of the Quran.
Yeah.
How many versions are there, Mel?
36 last time I've seen, but possibly more, with hundreds and thousands of variations between them.
Okay.
Not massively significant, but if the claim by Muslims is that this was perfectly preserved, I'd like to know which one is perfectly preserved.
Right.
You know. So you know. Any thoughts?
Any thoughts on
Yeah,
the
well,
preservation of the
I
Quran?
think that, as we just saw, it's very difficult having a conversation about anything. If if the idea is that we start raising some points about the origins of Islam or the source of how the Quran came into existence or what the Quran means, perfectly reasonable questions. But if people are just going to start wagging the finger at you and shouting about Christianity and the Holy Trinity, basically shouting over us, talking us down with his hostility, then you can't have any sensible discussion on any subject. So.
Going back to the Quran, obviously the Hafs is the most popular Quran within the Muslim world, and I do believe it was canonized in 1924. Is that correct?
1920, was it 1921 or 1924? I can't remember.
24 is the
24.
time when I forget the name now. The Egyptian
The king. What's his name? The king.
created one version.
Yeah.
Okay.
But personally, I don't attach so much importance to that. I'm rather more interested in the early companion codices, of which only one exists or partially exists. That's the Sanar palimpsest. But I'm interested in the accounts of multiple versions of multiple Qurans before then. Not because I'm interested in just knocking down Islam for the sake of it, but I'm interested in how the thing actually came about, the historical origins of the Quran. And that's interesting, but it's not as...
It seems that there's been a lot of guesswork in terms of where the diacritical point should be. Right. That can affect the meaning of the text. It may not be particularly massive in many cases, but in some cases might be very significant in terms of the meaning. The other thing that would be worth discussing is the sources of the Quran. Muslims believe that the Quran came down through a revelation from on high, whereas our point of view is that we can see clear historical references to multiple source books that they have used and made allusions to, So it's not as divine as it might come across at first read, let's say.
I mean, Adnan Rashid already confirmed that there are stories which came before the Quran, like Jesus breathing life into a clay bird, and which obviously means that there aren't any original revelations within the Quran. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what's alarming about their use of sources is the fact that they use almost no discernment, like any old source will do. They use Gnostic sources, they'll use biblical ones, they'll use Jewish or Christian, doesn't matter. They will use St. Ephrem, who condemns all heresies, and St. Ephrem, if he was alive and saw that Islam was using his analogies, his sources,
What would happen?
I think he'd be turning in his grave.
A bit of Merkavah mysticism, the legend of Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
There's just so many sources there, which makes it fascinating.
Yeah.
What I would
The
say...
Pseudo-Clementine homilies, which is a romance, it's a work of fiction. That's the origin of the Shahada, So it's incredible what they've used, It's mishmash.
I would say that the Quran doesn't even expect to be taken as the verbatim word of God or the speech of God. It's true that in many instances it is written with God as a divine voice speaking, but that doesn't mean it was intended to be taken literally. That might just be the way that the author chose to phrase his revelations and his messages. There are several, the large part of the Quran, possibly 2/3, 3/4, that isn't written in the divine voice, and it clearly talks about God in the second person.
Yeah.
Third
person, I
or
believe.
even the third person.
Yeah.
Why would God write, for example, Surah 1, the Al-Fatiha?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any pretext to be written, all Surahs 113 and 114. There's no pretext that it's the words of God. All it is a prayer to God.
Yeah, and it's I, it's we, it's you, it's he. It can't make up its mind who's talking to who. It's kind of like you're jumped into a conversation and you're completely lost. And this is the problem for reading the Quran, is it jumps from I to we to you to he. It starts a story, never finishes the story, jumps onto some other topic, comes back to it again. And on top of that, we can't even be certain that the diacritical marks are in the right place, so the meaning could be something totally different. A good friend of mine, Murad, has been looking into the true meaning of the Quran in the Arabic, and he's finding a lot of connections with Syriac. And the translation that we've been given is a very much a distorted meaning, and it's going to be interesting when he brings out his official translation of the Quran. It might actually change people's views of what the true meaning of the Quran is later, So.
Wow, I'm really looking forward to that. And obviously, you guys are doing an amazing job with Jay Smith at Pando Films, looking at the historicity of the Quran, Islam. Please tell the family how they can find your work, which channel they should be subscribing.
So my channel is Islamic Origins, and your channel is?
Oh, well, my main offering now is an article that I published last Easter on academia. It's called Jerusalem, City of Islam by Paul Ellis. So if you Google that, or you go onto the academia site and ask for Jerusalem, City of Islam, you will find it. It's very long. It's 100 pages long, and it tries to make the case that the Masjid al-Haram in the Quran, the place that is a holy place of worship, that the Quranic community was trying to capture, was in fact Jerusalem. There's nothing at all to do with Mecca. Mecca didn't exist, or there's no evidence that Mecca existed. Wow. But all the evidence points to Jerusalem. If you asked Moses, or David, or Solomon, or Saul, or Zechariah, or Abraham, or Jesus, or John the Baptist, where is the sacred place of worship, they would all say Jerusalem. With the exception of Moses, but Moses didn't know about Jerusalem, but he knew that in the book of Deuteronomy it says there will be a place, a pilgrimage, and that turned out to be Jerusalem. So all the characters that the Quran cites as its witnesses, all had a Jerusalem-centered approach. And my thesis is that it makes absolutely no sense for the Quran to keep referring to these characters and the sacred place of worship, and for the sacred place of worship to be somewhere 1,000 miles away.
Wow.
My that case.
We'll make sure to put your article on the description box, so make sure, family, you click on that and check out Mr. Ellis, Paul Ellis, our brother Paul Ellis' essay on these subjects. So one last final messages to those Muslims who still believe that there's only one Quran, unchanged, dot for dot, letter for letter. What would you like to tell them?
It's simply a myth. I think you need to do your homework. I think you need to look at what the scholars are saying. We're not making this up. You can look at the manuscripts. If you go to the earliest copies of the Quran, you see that there are no diacritical marks there. And so someone has basically guessed where the dot should go. And there could be a completely, totally different meaning intended originally. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would say, let's suppose it's true. Suppose it's true that the Quran really is the speech of God, the verbatim revelation of God, the celestial tablet. Let's suppose it's true. All the more reason why you should understand it. We all need to understand it. It seems to me absolutely obvious that the Quran is written for people who are familiar with the Bible. It half tells stories. It refers to stories, it makes complex biblical allusions, not just to named prophets, but little turns of phrase, little rather subtle allusions. They're all there. Modern scholarship is picking them out. If you really, really thought this was the word of God, you'd want to really understand it and not be satisfied with very simplistic explanations. Why did they talk about the companions of the elephant? Oh, that's okay, you've got a story about the elephant. Why did they talk about God carrying his prophet to the furthest place of prostration? Oh, okay, that's a miraculous journey. Don't be satisfied with simplistic, random explanations that clearly add nothing to the story except offering an explanation for the words. Try and make sense of it and tie it to reality.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you guys. If you enjoyed this video, family, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.